All right. Good evening, everybody that's on this space. Appreciate everybody that's joining on here to listen to Miss Darcy Schoening and her vision as the next Colorado GOP chair. Election for the Colorado GOP chair will be held March 29th, I believe, down in Castle Rock. Um, so let's kind of maybe give everybody another minute or so to get on here. And Darcy, I sent you okay, you are on as a co host. And Steve, I did to you as well. If you want to be a speaker and um, ask Darcy questions, just send a little request thing and I will get you invited up as a speaker. So let's just kind of give it another minute and then we'll go from there. Does that work, Darcy?
Sounds good. Thanks, Trent.
Yep. All right, Darcy, we're going to go ahead and get started here. There'll probably be a few more people, I hope, jump on here. I don't really have any time restriction here. I just want Darcy to be able to lay out her vision as the next Colorado GOP chair. And if you want to be invited up as a speaker, send me a request and I will get you on as a speaker. And I am now going to hand the reins over to Darcy here. And Darcy, if you just want to tell us about you, what your current role is with the Colorado GOP, and then your vision as the next GOP chair. I just want to lay a few ground rules here, and that is I just want everybody to be respectful. Let Darcy lay out her vision, and then if you have questions, please raise your hand if you're a speaker, and I'll call on you. And I will say if anybody gets out of line, I will drop you out as out of speaking. So I just want to lay those ground rules there first. And Darcy, the floor is all yours.
Thanks, Trent. And thanks to everyone on this call. For those of you who don't know, we have been very diligent in doing periodic calls and Zooms, and we're going to keep that up so that everybody, whether you're a voter or a non voter, you can kind of have a lot of opportunities to jump on and not only hear my vision, but also ask questions and voice your concerns. So, with that said, my name is Darcy Schoening. I'm the current Director of Special Initiatives for the Colorado GOP. So, for the last several years, my role has largely been creating initiatives and policies for local school boards, city councils, county commissions. And I also really focus heavily on not only writing the policy for the school boards, but making sure that the right candidates are elected. In the last school board cycle, I was instrumental in making sure that Republicans across the state of Colorado knew who the Republican candidates were and what those candidates needed from us, because in the misleading phrase nonpartisan races, we kind of get lost in the shuffle. So, education is a really, really big deal to me. I spend a lot of time fighting for our kids and fighting for what's right in our schools. Just a couple weeks ago, I was out in Durango standing up for the kids in 9R whose school district voted to sanction the BLM flag and sanction the trans flag as protected speech, which is just absolutely ridiculous. But that's just one story out of probably hundreds that I have over the last several years. So, again, my role has largely just been to not only write policies, but go around and make sure that the localities have the resources, have the tools that they need to go ahead and enact those policies. So I've been focusing a lot on that. I led the candidate initiative for the Colorado GOP in the last cycle of races and built what I feel is some really good infrastructure that I can now bring into the 2025 school board races. And in my vision for those school board races, I have created with my team the Bob Initiative, Build Our Benches. We have over $150,000 already in donor commitments for those 2025 school board elections. I've already been working with just my team of volunteers. I'll be honest, it's just my friends who get annoyed with me that are putting together right now for us, before I'm elected chair, a massive database of what's going on across the state with those school board elections. So after we reclaim some seats in 2025 and hold on to the conservative majorities that we have with our local school boards, we will have built a really robust infrastructure of data, systems, and processes that we can then carry over into the 2026 elections and have a candidate initiative that is far reaching, that gives our candidates confidence, that gives them the tools that they need, but also gives our donors confidence that they can give money to the Colorado GOP, that they can give money to candidates, and that it's going to be a good investment for their dollar, that we're going to take back seats, and that those Republican candidates are good Republicans who do the things that we elected them to do, that they don't just cave to the Democrats. So, all of that to say, education again is a big focus of mine, but to that end, fundraising, like I said, we have the Build Our Benches initiative coming up, and that's a huge focus of mine. I really want to go into 2025 and 2026 and take back seats, take back Colorado. It takes a strong leader to keep us all moving on the same page. That's something that people have seen from me for years. I'm able to work with literally anybody, and if we stay goal focused and all of us move in the same direction, electing candidates and advancing our values, then that again is how we achieve true unity, true togetherness. We're not going to all agree on the same things at the same time, but we can certainly work together and use each of our values to turn Colorado red again. So, with that said, I'll turn it back over to Trent for a second, and then we can discuss some specifics. And if anybody has any questions after that, then we'll get to questions.
Absolutely, Darcy. Can you just tell us here on the space tonight, what are your top three things that you want to accomplish? I know you talked about school board races and how, they are nonpartisan. Well, they are partisan because the teachers' unions donate to them. But, looking into 2026 as well, um, what are your top three things that if you were elected in March, you would start on day one moving forward with the GOP?
Sure. So, as I mentioned, reclaiming seats, creating a robust candidate initiative, that's a huge deal. It shouldn't just be that, Darcy's working on the candidates or whoever's working on the candidates. We have to create a system that we can replicate election after election through fundraising, through data. And then, as I mentioned earlier, building out the data and infrastructure so that we have a system that not only is as good as the Democrats, but it's better for anybody to win as governor in the next cycle and for us to reclaim seats anywhere. We have to have data that's on point. So I really want to build our data infrastructure, our critical resources that we have. I mean, I hear every single day from people, every single day. Why don't we have a calendar for the state GOP so that I know what's going on across the state from all the counties? Why do 60% of the counties not even have websites? And so those are things that I really want to focus on. And that's, that's something that we get in there for a couple of months and we really focus on it. And then as time goes by, we just continue building that and make sure that it's something that we build on year after year for our candidates and for our activists and for our donors. And then lastly, the third thing, which has really started to come up for me, and it's really become a place that I think I excel in the last several months, and I've talked about on the radio a couple times recently. When you have those arguments, when you have that quote unquote disunity that people like to talk about, one of the things that I'm really good at and people know me for is I pull people into a room, I pull people into a Zoom call, and I say, okay, look, this isn't working. We need to work this out so we can get the maximum benefit for the party out of everybody. Like, we can't live like this. We can't operate as an organization like this. So I really want to focus on problem solving with people and bringing people to the same page. I want to run the Colorado GOP like a fine-tuned organization. And you can't work at Walmart, you can't work at Google and be fighting with the person in the cubicle next to you and refusing to do the work. So I really want to start to triage out some of those personality conflicts and really get in there and figure out how we can get people on the same page.
That's great, Darcy, because the one thing that you hear about is unity, unity, unity. And to me, the word unity is a chewed up word and spit out because nobody can define what unity means and what it stands for. And so, what I believe unity is where it doesn't matter how you feel on something, it's a matter of what can we all agree on, what issues, what topics can we agree on, remove the personal animosity towards each other, and move forward accomplishing what we agree on. Would you agree with that?
I totally agree. That's how I mean, that is literally what unity is. It's not about agreeing with everybody. It's not about, there's always going to be conflicts, but it's just how do we work together and how do we move in the same direction to be a party? I mean, that's the whole purpose of a party, for people with like-minded values to come together and advance the goals of the party.
Absolutely, because the goal should be electing Republicans to our back. And so,
Exactly.
regardless of who the Republican is, there's several I don't like in the state. But at the end of the day, if we need to get behind them and support them and move the needle forward, regardless if we agree 100% on what that candidate does or what that elected Republican does, we do need to find common ground and move forward, or we're never going to take this state
Yeah,
back.
exactly.
All right. Well, I won't do as much talking now.
It's okay.
Just so you guys know, I'll just kind of go over the ground rules again. If you want to be a speaker, just send me a request here and I'll invite you up as a speaker. Um, no topic is off limits. I just ask for there to be respect and allow Darcy to answer questions. If it does get out of hand, I will mute you and drop you down as a listener. So, Gav, I will turn it over to you. You've had your hand up here, and I appreciate you waiting.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Um, I know that there has been a lot of fatigue within the party, particularly lately. What's your plan to bring back or kind of incentivize Republicans who have fallen inactive, or what's your plan to bring back disaffected Republicans?
Well, I mean, several things. We have to have a really aggressive outreach program, but more than that, it's about showing communities, showing people who live in El Paso County, Douglas County, Chaffey County, that being a Republican is not just voting for Trump and it's not just getting Republicans elected, right? We stand for a certain core set of values that when we fight for those values, whether it's our individual freedoms, the freedom to raise our family as we see fit, our Second Amendment rights. When we have communities where those values are on full display, people are safer, our streets are safer, our communities are cleaner, our kids have higher test scores, they do better in school. So it's not about necessarily the words that we use to convince people to come to our side. It's the actions and it's the way that we build our communities that shows them that, look, how these people live in Monument, how these people live in Highlands Ranch is infinitely better than how their peers are living in Denver, or how people are doing at the 16th Street Mall or Aurora or wherever else may be the case. So we have to continue to do the work of advancing our values, electing Republicans, and then working with those Republicans to make sure that they're advancing our values. And that's how we bring people to the Republican Party, by showing them what it means to be a Republican. And we do also have to engage our youth, our Hispanic population, our Black population, our unaffiliated. We have to meet them where they're at. And a large part of doing that with our minority communities is literally about what I just said. It's not about going out and seeing all the things and, talking about taxes and talking about limited government and talking about abortion. They already know all that. So if they're not on our side by listening to the words that we're saying, then that's clearly not enough. We have to be doing the things that it means to be a Republican. So thank you for your question.
That's a great answer, Darcy. Because the one thing that I hear every election cycle is we have to engage Hispanics. We have to engage Hispanics. We have to engage Hispanics. But there's never been a direction as to what does that mean? What is that path forward to engage? There's nothing tangible there. We saw that a couple years ago when the RNC came in and dropped in a Hispanic outreach center um, next to Top Golf in Thornton, nowhere near a Hispanic community. So I would say that that problem goes all the way up to the national level. But if you're a chair, what is it that you're going to do specifically to reach out to that community? Because they're a big voting bloc, and I feel like they're going to be what decides this next governor's race and these statewide races coming up in 26.
Yeah, sure. So it's about the messaging that we put out there. It's more than just, I'll be honest, how many Republican organizations do we see across the country that it's almost cringe? It's like they think if they hold an event that's Donald Trump and tacos, that's what it takes to get Republicans. And I wish it were. I mean, I love tacos, but that's not how this works. So the messaging that we're using has to be on point, and it has to show those people, like I said, what's going on in our communities. Why do they want to be part of our communities versus the Denver community or the Boulder community? So as we're in the churches, as we're holding events, as we're sending mailers, as we're sending texts, as we're doing the bulk mail and outreach to the Hispanic community, as we're doing the drives, it's about saying to them, do you know what's going on in Highlands Ranch? Do you know what's going on in the schools out there? Or, do you know what's going on in El Paso County, or what's going on in your community? Like I continue to stress, it's about meeting these voters where they're at and asking them what their issues are, how their communities could be made better, and then showing them how the Republican Party is doing that and will continue to do that, especially with their help.
Great. Avery, you were invited up here to speak. So did you have a question for Darcy?
No, I was, but I can add on to what she was saying actually a little bit.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Yeah, talking about the disaffected Republican and how do we win those? I would say what we truly need right now is actual Republicans that realize that we cannot fall into a democracy. We have to only want people on our side that want to follow the original founding documents that state that we all have God given rights, and those rights cannot be taken away with the 51% majority, which is what a democracy is. And that's what they're trying to turn this country into, a democracy. So, true Republicans, we have to remain a republic and follow the founding rights that we're always supposed to have, no matter what the majority says, no matter what laws they try and implement. So, that's what I think.
Thank you, Avery. And I couldn't agree with that more. I mean, I definitely feel like sometimes we lose people, we lose Republicans when they don't know what we stand for. I mean, most of the people on this call are very active politically, and we get frustrated when Republican elected officials and Republican boards and governments don't stand for our values. So imagine how the average voter feels. Imagine how the person who's just a little bit involved feels. Most of the time they don't know where the party stands, and it's hard to know when you've got people that don't stand by the party platform. And that's why it's so important to do so, because they've got to have confidence. And if we ask them, if we ask people to knock on doors, if we ask them to come to our side, if we ask them to vote Republican for the first time ever, ask them to make calls, whatever it may be, we have to provide them something in return. And the only thing we can provide them is literally our actions, our word. We have to do what we are elected to do as Republicans. Otherwise, why have a party? We might as well not have a party. If we say, well, the Democrats want this today, so I'm going to go and I'm going to cave on my values so that I can get my name on a bill. Okay, then why have a party? You're just working for yourself. And that's what we have to start holding people accountable for.
Absolutely. Um, Mr. Foxy, Rocky Mountain, you got a question? Your hand's up there.
Yeah, so in talking a little bit more about some of that targeted outreach that you alluded to, Darcy, such as the Hispanic outreach and African American outreach, things like that. I know, especially within the metro area, that some of our county parties, large segments of them, have no precinct committee people. They have no district captains. So in some cases, swaths of these targeted communities that just so happen to overlap areas where Republicans have seen losses over the last 4 to 6 years are vacant. And can you speak to kind of what your plan would be, whether it's directly from the state party or whether it's working with the counties to help fill these gaps?
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked that question. Obviously, some of it is, we're able to funnel some PCPs in and some volunteers in from local organizations such as the Young Republicans, Douglas County Women, as an example. And those have historically been a good pipeline. Those organizations then go out to things like county fairs and parades, and they register more people and they hopefully find more volunteers. But I think we've got to start thinking outside of the box. And I don't want to ever be playing catch up with the Democrats, but let's be honest, we're playing catch up with the Democrats. We live in Colorado, right? So it's okay to say that they are not just using 75-year-old organizations, which play a key role in political parties, but you see them out at football games. You see them at concerts. You see the Democrats registering volunteers and activists all over the place. I mean, I was at a concert this past summer in El Paso County, and it was a huge concert, thousands and thousands and thousands of people. And I saw the local Democrat Party there recruiting people. We don't ever do stuff like that. We just show up at fairs and parades. That's largely been the Republican Party. We spend 3 weeks making a float, and all that's fine and great, but we've got to be boots on the ground. Another place that we're not utilizing high schools. The Democrat Party is very active in high schools, and we need to be talking to the 16, 17, 18 year olds. And any chance we get, we can talk. Why can't we ask our Republican school boards, hey, give me a couple minutes in front of your junior and senior classes next week? I guarantee if the Democrat Party asked them, they'd say yes. So, it's there's a lot of moving pieces, but we've got to be pulling people in from wherever it takes to get those Republicans in as precinct leaders and get them in as volunteers. I could go on all night about all the ideas I have on that, but if you want to, get me, or if you want to have a 2 hour conversation about that, feel free to give me a call. There's tons of areas that where we can be bringing precinct leaders in.
What would you do to work with and engage the counties on that? I know, as a PCP myself, a district captain here in Weld County, one of the biggest issues that we have is data, right? I mean, being able to get something down that's very user friendly, something that the PCPs can understand with just a little amount of training, because pretty much everybody's tech related these days on their phones, so it's easy to be able to just you know um, decipher the data and then work your precinct. And so there's a lot of vacancies throughout the
Yeah.
state. I would imagine that there's thousands of vacancies across the state and PCP. So what would you do to work with the county party to show that, hey, we're working on this together, we want to work and help you, not just say we want you to do this, but we want to help you. What do you need?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, we can offer people all kinds of support as far as that goes. We could talk about, do we need to send a couple people out there? Do we need to send some outreach, so whether it's mail, text, whatever? But I think that the as you hit the nail on the head, with data, we know, right? If we have a snapshot right now about all the vacancies across the state, you're right, there are thousands, and there is a snapshot of that. And we've already talked about the fact that there's no excuse for county parties in 2025 to not have a website, to not have a social media, right? We have to have those things. So when I am elected chair, one of the things that I've continued to reiterate is that the state party website needs to be totally redone, scrapped, completely built over. It has to have a calendar, and then it has to have websites to each individual county. So because it's cumbersome for people to go online and say, where's my local GOP office? Does Montgomery County even have a GOP office, right? And I don't expect people that are doing this as a volunteer position to spend 80 hours building a website on Wix. That's also ridiculous. So we'll have templates for these counties that they are able to feed into our website, feed into our calendar. They're able to show their precinct level vacancies, and they're able to, in real time, show the community where they need help, and then we'll help them communicate that across social media too. I mean, social media is a big deal. We don't even have the data yet on how big of a deal social media is in elections and in politics. Like, it's so non-quantifiable. So if you have a county out in a rural area that's looking for precinct leaders, or looking for people to come and answer the phones, or looking for people to help spend that 8 days to build a parade float, social media is the biggest free tool that you have. And then the next biggest tool that you have is your website. So I really want to work with the counties to get their data on their websites, get their websites fed into the GOP website, and then get that thing running like the well-oiled machine that it should be, showing in real time a state calendar, all the county events, every city council meeting across the state, every school board meeting across the state, every legislative hearing that affects us. Because otherwise, how do we get anything done? It's all data. So that all of that to say, yeah, I got a lot of work to do.
Yes, you do. Okay, there are a couple comments here that I wanted to get you to answer here. One of them is, what's your feelings on Tina Peters? Can you address that?
My feelings on on Tina Peters. Okay. So she is in jail for 9 years for what she did in Mesa County with the passwords in her attempt to expose what was going on with Dominion voting machines. Tina Peters has been sentenced to an inordinate amount of time for what the judge is terming her crime. So her sentence is not commensurate with what crime the judge is saying that she committed. And that's why Tina Peters has been such a passionate cause for so many of us. We have to stand by when things aren't right. Listen, there are people in this state in 2025 alone that the largest fentanyl dealer in Chaffee County was sentenced to less time than Tina Peters. A guy in Pueblo last month who violently assaulted four people and left one of them just critically injured was sentenced to the same amount of time as Tina Peters. This is a 70-year-old woman who is in jail for 9 years for fighting for election integrity. So no matter how we feel about Tina Peters, it doesn't matter how I feel. It's about what's just and what's not. And right now, Tina Peters serving 9 years is not a just sentence.
Can you speak to what you have done recently to help the efforts to get Tina released from jail?
Sure. So one of the things that has not been done that I stepped in and did was contacted uh, Pam Bondi and really called on the AG's office to investigate the actions of the judge that sentenced Tina Peters. In his statement, he actually said that he wanted to make an example of her and that he wanted to sentence her to a lot of time because she wasn't sorry. If that's not emotional and if that's not political persecution, then I don't know what is. And I find it disturbing to live in a world where somebody my mother's age could serve 9 years in jail, that my mother could serve 9 years in jail for spoken words, for not making the judge feel like she's sorry enough for a crime that she committed where there were no victims. So I think that, you know, contacting the AG's office is necessary at this point. I also called on the Trump administration to freeze federal funding for some of Polis's pet programs, especially his literal pet programs, because that's what he loves most. Because 25% of Colorado's funding comes from the federal government. And if Jared Polis and his husband and this liberal legislature is going to receive the benefit of 25% of their unnecessary funding coming from Donald Trump and the federal government, then you know what? They need to do the right thing and they need to pardon Tina Peters. And when Kyle Clark reached out to Jared Polis said that Tina Peters had not applied for a pardon. So Tina Peters needs to now apply for a pardon so that Jared Polis cannot use that as an excuse. Once she applies, I want to call Jared Polis and I will say to him, I have his personal cell phone number, and I will say to him, okay, Tina Peters applied for her pardon. When will you be pardoning her? And let him fill in the blanks, because then what's his excuse? Okay, well, if now you want to tell me that it was a just sentence, then okay, let's see how much federal funding we can freeze of yours, because again, it's so unjust that something has to be done.
One of the interesting things that I thought that came out of that, Kyle Clark, the little short clip that he did the other day, was that, when he did reach out to the governor's office, he did ask him specifically, have they been in contact with the Trump administration? And they refused to answer that. So that tells me that there probably are some preliminary conversations. We don't know, but I mean, that would make me think that there probably is some conversations there being had, hopefully.
Yeah, and I think Polis's tone kind of shows that. And I mean, he's tried to paint himself as a libertarian for a long time. We think he's either going to be running for president next or running for Senate. So he's trying to position himself as fair and unbiased. And we need to play up on that as well. I mean, he probably feels somewhat weak right now with a totally Republican federal government. And I think we can really use that to our advantage. We've been in a totally blue situation for the past 4 years, and now we've got the federal government on our side.
Absolutely. And it was great seeing you yesterday at the Tina Peters rally up here in Fort Collins as we're trying to put pressure on the sheriff here in Larimer County, who does have some say in uh, releasing Tina until her appeal gets taken up. So, um, you know, we're applying as much pressure as possible, and it's nice, and I hope I would say that's one thing that I'm disappointed uh, in the GOP right now is that they're you know we haven't stood by as a state party Tina Peters and what she has gone through and supported her and just been that vocal advocate that she needs to get her message out. So um, I hope that changes if you're elected chair, that you can continue and uh, make sure that Tina has a voice.
Well, that's one of my roles in this state, Trent. I'm glad to give the right causes and the right people a voice, because mine is so loud that I don't need it for just myself. I can share with everybody in Colorado. So that's what I'm doing. So I'm glad to help Tina. She was a friend of mine way back. I spoke for her a couple times when she was running for Secretary of State. But aside from that, it's the right thing to do. I mean, it's when somebody's in jail and they're just sitting there day after day after day. I can't even imagine how that woman is feeling. And it's just, like I said, it's just such an injustice. These illegals are running people over in their cars and raping women, and they're out the next day. So we cannot allow this to stand, and we won't. I won't. I'm not allowing it to stand now, and I won't allow it as chair.
That's great. I appreciate your how you feel about that, and I feel like that's the right vision that we need to have moving forward. Is regardless of who's at the helm, and obviously I hope it's you, but regardless of who's at the helm, that Tina Peters, until she's out of jail, is kept as on the forefront of Republicans and everyone across the state of Colorado. So thank you on that. So. Um, I know we got quite a few people on here now. We're just holding a town hall here for Darcy Schoening, who is one of the announced candidates for the Colorado GOP chair. Election comes up this March, on March 29th. For those that don't know how this election goes, can you kind of tell everybody who's the voting members? How do you become a voting member? Has that already happened? Just kind of share with everybody on that.
Sure. So the voting members have already been elected for the next 2 years, and they consist of the county chair, vice chair, and bonus members. So that would be the county leadership for all of the counties in Colorado. Those were elected at the last set of reorganizational meetings. So if you're a chair, vice chair, secretary, or bonus member, I'm sorry, then you're a voting member. That is on March 29th, and that will be a hybrid situation. So it'll be in Castle Rock, but apparently it'll also be online, so people can attend online. There won't be proxies allowed. The bylaws were changed recently, so proxies are not permitted at this meeting. But even if you're not a voting member, you probably have 10 or 20 or more friends who are voting members. So we can use all the help that we can get in this campaign between now and March 29th. If you want to just, make a couple calls, text a couple friends, even if you just like my vision and want to share it on social media, every click, every phone call, every text helps. So just make sure that, if you like my vision, like I said, just go ahead and text us or send me a message and let us know, and we'll get you plugged in. I was on with Peter Boyles on Saturday, and that link will be shared shortly on Spaces. It's on my Twitter, which is here. You guys are on, so you can see where my Twitter is, and it's on my Facebook page. And it on Peter Boyle's, he asked me a lot of tough questions. He asked me how do I separate myself from Dave. He asked me about the lawsuits. He asked me about all kinds of stuff, and that was an hour-long interview. So I would encourage anybody on this call to check that out so that you can hear me in a different light. But you can also just pick up the phone at any time and I'll answer. That's one of the things that people like about me, and they continue to say that that's why they're voting for me, is because I always answer the phone. I always help them with their problems. It may take a couple times calling me some days because I'm all over the place, but I think most people know, and even most people on this call know, that if you call, I'm going to pick up the phone and I'm going to try to help you. So listen to the Peter Boyles interview, the Chuck and Julie show. Ryan Schuling had me on recently, but if you really just want to have a one-on-one conversation or just go grab a cup of coffee and hear my vision and share your concerns with me, I'm always available to do that as well.
Awesome. Just to kind of give you a heads up, Darcy, you are kind of cutting a little bit. I know you live in the hills in El Paso County, but if you're like my house, I got to stand in one position and I'm not in the hills. So just kind of give you a heads up on that. So, um, yeah, if anybody has any questions you want to ask Darcy, please send me an invite and I can bring you up as a speaker. If you are a speaker and have questions, just raise your hand and I will call on you there. Um, One of the other questions that was asked here in the chat was, let's see. Oh, so it is a Dave question. How do you feel about what Dave did for the Colorado GOP?
Well, okay. So, sorry, and I apologize if I'm breaking up. Trent, I don't know how you picture Monument, Colorado as the hills, but that's fine. So moving, how do I feel about Dave as chair and what he did for the Colorado GOP is an interesting question because we all lead differently. We all are different. Like if I were the CEO of Google tomorrow, you would be a much different CEO than me. Working for Dave has been really a rewarding experience. And you guys will get an email from me today telling a really nice story that I remember about when I first started working for Dave, or maybe it's about a year ago. But he's done some really big things. Like his work in trying to close the primaries is crucial, and I really want to continue that work. But that said, we're not the same type of leader. We do things entirely differently. And the last 2 years, while they've been great, they would have looked entirely different under me. I am heavily focused on candidates, education, and outreach, and making sure that we turn Colorado back red again. And I think that I lead so differently from Dave. I have a more aggressive approach to the outreach. Emails, all kinds of things. So to answer your question, I mean, I feel like he was an important part of the Colorado GOP. He'll always be, part of where we are as a Republican Party in Colorado. But I'm excited for the next two years or however long I stay as chair. I'm excited for that because I will really set myself apart from this administration and show people, the work that I've been putting in over the last several years. It's about to be amplified and it's about to be kicked up to the next level, and we're going to take Colorado back.
That's great. How long have you been an employee for the Colorado GOP?
Going on 2 years.
Going on 2 years. And so, I know that there's been controversy within the party over the last year and a half. I think what I see in you is that you're not Anna, you're not Dave, you're not Hope, you're Darcy, and that's who you are. And I hope that as this election comes up, that people can separate all of that and see you for what you have done for the Colorado GOP. And that, it's important for people to know that you're not an elected member of the Colorado GOP. You were asked to come in to doing a job as director of special initiatives, and you did that, and that's what you focused on. So, all the controversies aside, that was your focus. Working to get candidates elected and reaching out to candidates, and um, you know you worked with Rebecca Kelty, correct, in El Paso County?
Yes, yeah. Definitely worked a lot with Rebecca. She, I helped her with certain parts of her campaign. Actually assisted with a fundraiser for Rebecca, and helped cure ballots for Rebecca and provide her with data that she needed. That actually I was able to track down. And because the data was not readily available, it took a couple different systems to find it. And that's what I hope to eliminate this next round, is all that confusion. But yep, worked with Rebecca, worked with Dan, worked with Dan Woog. Plenty of candidates across the state would tell you that every week I was on those calls. I always answered their calls. I tried to provide whatever resource they needed, whether it was a website built or a list or whatever. But there were over 200 of them this last year.
Correct. And are you a contractor type employee for the Colorado GOP, W-2 employee?
Yeah, contracted. So I'm not a party to that lawsuit. That's been asked several times on the radio recently. I'm not a party to that lawsuit. But I have received payments from the Colorado GOP for my work fundraising for, certain initiatives or whatever may be the case. Yeah.
The one of the things I admire about you, Darcy, is that, you you're not someone that goes around and says, I did this, I did this, I did this. You want to be in the trenches working side by side with people, and not necessarily out there wanting to take credit for wins. And there were several wins across the state, quite notably here in Weld County. A lot of people stepped up to the plate in Weld County to help flip seats. There wasn't one particular individual who is and who I guess is successful in doing that. It was all a collective effort, and what you did with Rebecca down there in El Paso County. But I just want people to know that you know what I love about you is that you don't go around saying I did this. You go around and saying, hey, we all worked as a team to get this done.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And I think that's important because I didn't get anybody elected. I mean, Darcy alone can't do anything, just like Trent alone can't do anything, and that's what we continue to come back to when we talk about unity. Like, I've got certain skills that are of value when it is election season, and you've got certain skills, right? And Reed has certain skills, and everybody on this call has certain skills. So it's about what we bring to the table to accomplish our goal. And listen, one of my favorite things in the world, I don't know why, I think I'm just crazy, but I love curing ballots. I love that satisfaction of, like, right now this ballot doesn't count, but this guy's going to check a box and show me his license, and then this ballot counts for Lauren Boebert, or it counts for Dan Woog or Rebecca Kelty or whatever. And so I've become really good at curing ballots. Now, one of the things that I'm not really good at is I'm not good at planning a little fundraising event, right? That's not really my thing. But guess what? I've got 10 or 20 or 30 lady friends in El Paso County that's their jam. That's exactly what they're good at. And so if we look at it like that, where everybody's taking their best skills, what they're good at, and bringing it to the table, we won't lose. You can't lose if you run an organization like that. So we've got to get back to, like I said, get past the personalities and get to doing the actual work.
All right. Well, thank you, Darcy. Does anybody have any questions you want to ask Darcy? Um,
Yeah, I got a question, Trent.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Adam.
So my biggest concern is, like, obviously there's a lot of division in the party. There's a lot of things going on, and one thing you definitely brought up, which I found interesting, is that we're flipping seats. We're starting to move in the right direction. But my biggest concern, and I'm watching, all the voting that's going on in the Golden Dome right now, and we have Republicans that did flip seats that are voting for Democratic bills against Agenda 47 and conservative values. How are you going to ensure, as chair, that we are going to get the right Republicans that only follow Trump's Agenda 47, representing Republicans and conservative values in Colorado, that are not going to vote against what we put them into office to do? Because I think that's the biggest threat to us, is that, we brag about, we want to widen the tent. We don't want to close the primaries, which I'm not in favor for this exact reason. Because if we're bringing moderate Republicans that are going to vote with Democrats, it defeats the entire purpose of what our mission here is in the state of Colorado. How are you going to ensure, as chair, that we're going to get the right Republicans into the right seats, and what is going to be your vetting process to do that?
Sure. So, I would answer that in a really complicated approach. I'm going to do my best. So, first, I'd push back a little and I would say, what are the right Republicans? Because as we look at it, right, we have to look at the district. And i- is okay, if we're talking about Ken DeGraff's district, right? House District 22. Ken DeGraff can and should be required by our party at all times to vote 100% conservatively. And he does. So we're good. We're good with Ken DeGraff, right? So now if we look at a district, like let's say we look at a district, Mary Bradfield's district, she's in House District 21. That leans conservative, but not as conservatively, right? So you look at Mary Bradfield. Then you've got other Republican districts, especially further up north, like Woog's district, where I don't even know if you'd call it a conservative district. Yes, he won, but is it a conservative district? So there's different tiers of conservative districts, just like there's different tiers of candidates when we go to break them out. And so we have to look at it with a fair approach. Does that mean that I'm saying, okay, we should tolerate all Republicans at all times just sailing our values down the river? No, it doesn't. And you know that I would never think like that. But we have to be reasonable. We have to be reasonable with where we can be, and then we have to be forceful and aggressive where we can be. So if you have somebody in a moderate district or a district that leans Democrat, let's say, Adam, what's going to happen? What's going to happen when that Republican is championing, let's say they go ahead and they run, five social bills that are just show bills that are never going to pass, right? They're going to likely make a dent in their unaffiliated vote. So we have to work with them to determine, how do we get them to vote most conservatively without hurting their vote? And that's about educating them. So Lori Garcia Sander, who voted for that horrific bill the other day. We can go out on social media all we want and post that she's a rhino or she didn't uphold our values, but that doesn't change how she voted. And it's not going to change how she voted the next time. And it's not going to change whether she's reelected. It's just not, because the money's behind her. She's in a district that elected that type of Republican. So we have to have some reasonable outreach with those Republicans where we say, okay, how can we get to a place where you're voting more conservatively, where you don't just look at me and tell me that the Liberty scorecard is trash or cut is trash and it's all biased? Because that's not the case. It's based on data, Lori. It's based on data, Mary Bradfield. So we as a party, we're the leaders, right? They're elected officials, but the chair is the ultimate leader. So I would like to start pulling those Republicans back into rooms, back into phone calls, and saying, what the hell are you doing? Like, make this make sense and help me get you to a place where our own party is not attacking you, because that can't be comfortable for them. So let's get everybody into a room. Let's get everybody onto a call and let's start figuring these things out.
Thank you. I agree. I just see the way that some of these Republicans that so-called flip seats are voting,
Yeah.
and they're not voting for our values. And I think there needs to be a centralized messaging from the state chair that's going to ensure that, yeah, you might be voting unpopular because you're in a so-called moderate or more Democratic area,
Hmm.
but that's the point. We need to make Colorado red, and we can't do that with Republicans voting on Democratic tickets. So thank you so much
Right.
for
We
that.
can't. I totally agree with you. No, thank you.
Darcy, how would you send that message to our electeds as a state chair for the GOP, where you do have some Republicans who are wishy-washy or who, don't have, you know, what I would call ideal liberty scores, that
Hmm.
seem to be voting more with Democrats than, as a Republican. And I understand that there is a level of negotiation. And I know Trump would say that if you got 80% of what you wanted, that's a win. And so, how do we get to that level? Because it seems like we're at 50% or less.
Oh, well,
So,
yeah.
how do we get to the 80%, where we can chalk some victories up in the state legislature and, but yet, we're not compromising everything to get there?
Well, I'll be honest. Right now, we're not even close. Right now in Colorado, I'll be really blunt. If you see Republicans on a bipartisan bill, there's a 95% chance that bill is trash. There's no such thing as bipartisan in Colorado. This is a blue state, right? The Democrats don't need Ken DeGraff, they don't need Rose Puglisi, they don't need Scott Bottoms, and they don't need Mary Bradfield to pass their bill. Okay. So think about that in rational terms. If I don't need if I don't need any Republican to pass my bill and I'm Joe Democrat, why am I putting them on it? It's not I'm not going to give them anything in return. They don't need them. It doesn't matter whether these Republicans are signing on to these bills. And that is what is so catastrophic right now with our state party and the legislature, is that these Republicans are going to work and they're saying, like, I signed a bill to blah 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 blah. Okay, and the Democrats took you for a fool, because right now they may as well not even show up 90% of the time, Trent, and it would be better than if they did, because signing on to Democrat legislation, signing on to program after program after program is definitely not what we're about. So some of this has to be proactive, right? So these state reps are elected, and the only education that they receive is from the House or the Senate. It's from the legislature. They receive classes from the legislature. Now, I'm close with a lot of the legislators. Do you know what most of those classes look like? They look like them telling our newly elected legislators how they could be more equitable, how they can treat their trans state reps with more respect. It's not about how to be conservative, I can tell you that much. So the state GOP ought to be putting out nonstop communication to these elected officials. Hey, guess what? Here's our bill tracker. Here's the next 10 bills that are coming down. Here's what's coming down next week. Here's how we expect you to vote. Here's what so and so is saying about this bill. Here's what you need to do. Do you have any questions? Give me a call. And guess what? When we start hearing that Lisa Frizzell or Lori Garcia Sander is starting to buckle on these bills, the state chair needs to be on the phone with them. And then the vice chair needs to be on the phone with them. And then the whole state of Republicans needs to be on the phone with them. So there's definitely, we're not even close to being on the same page as far as these bills go. And so to answer your question about negotiations, we're not even close. We Until we flip a couple more seats, the Democrats have no incentive to work with us. They don't have to. Like I said, our Republicans could all stay home tomorrow and the Democrats could pass every single bill they wanted. So until we start making the right noise, and until we start voting conservatively and we're together as a party and we're filling more seats, it's not going to happen.
Yeah,
Sorry, I lost the next answer,
no,
but
and you're correct because I mean, when you look at some of these seats that Rebecca Kelty won by 3 or 4 votes, Dan Woog won by about 100 votes. You got Ryan Gonzalez who flipped that seat after 20 years, getting Scott Bright in the Senate. What do we do as a party to keep those seats? Because it's going to be tough. And I would say, some of that was due to this red wave that we finally seen in Trump and people having enough of what was going on. And I think that was at play. You're not necessarily going to have that at play in 26. So, how do we hold on to those seats and then chip away at a few more seats to be able to, gain more control in the House or in the Senate?
well, sure. So those seats like Scott's, those in the next cycle, and they already have become, they become the seats that we're fighting to hold on to, and they become part of the critical races initiative where we coalesce as a party to support these really, really critical candidates. And we've got to make sure, listen, as a party, we can't, we don't want to beat up on our candidates in the primaries. We've got to, especially these candidates that are in critical seats. Look, Rebecca Kelty in House District 16, nobody had better run against her next time, okay? Like, we need all the time and all the resources and all the coalescing around Rebecca. This business of hurting other Republicans in the primaries. Okay, if somebody's not doing their job and we want to, and somebody wants to run against them, great. But when it comes to these critical seats, look, I want to see a coordinated effort that I'm going to organize over a year out. Like I said, while the school board races are still going on, to protect these candidates, to fundraise for them, to make sure that these seats are not lost, and then to identify the next round of seats, those tier 2 seats that we have to be funneling money, resources, time, volunteers, all of the things into. And if we keep doing that, I mean, those are the things we need to do. There should be no reason why we won't be successful. But that's why, as I said at the beginning of the call, the Bob initiative, that's going to be really crucial. That's what I've created for the school board races, to identify the critical seats. So the seats that we have to hold on to by a narrow margin, or the seats that we hope to gain. And there's historically been a narrow margin in the last several elections. And so we are identifying those seats, we're identifying candidates early. And that's part of the whole Build Our Benches initiative. And I'm going to do the same thing for the state races. I've already started looking for candidates, and the Bob initiative for the school board races will launch into the 2026 arena, so that we've got that really great infrastructure and we've got early candidate recruitment. We've got the best candidates we can find, and we're protecting the seats we need to protect, and just moving along on all fronts.
And on that initiative, how much money have you re- raised in pledges so far?
Sure. So I was just on the phone with a couple donors earlier today, and I believe that they're going to commit. So that would put us at around 180,000 for the Bob initiative, and that's for, like I said, local school board races. And if we can show those donors what we've done with the money, we're going to raise a lot more between now and November. I mean, this is only March. So we'll raise a lot more, and we'll show those donors that there's a lot of bang for their buck with the new Colorado GOP. And then they'll give us, infinitely more money for their investments in 2026, so that we can flip more state races.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it, Darcy. So, just to kind of get everybody caught up that may have joined in here recently, we're having a town hall here with Darcy Schoening. She is a candidate that's announced for Colorado GOP chair. And anybody, if you have any questions, please, and you want to be a speaker, send an invite and I will get you added here so you can ask Darcy whatever questions you have. because I don't want to be asking all of the questions. I want folks in the audience here to ask questions as well. Um, One of the things that I know I support 100%, and there are many across the state that do, and that is closing our primaries. And what does that look like for you? Obviously, there's a lawsuit going on. Would you continue that lawsuit? Would you work with the other side to, reverse what has happened in the state, or how would you work closing these primaries?
Sure. So closing the primaries is so important. If somebody doesn't want to close the primaries, if a candidate doesn't want to close the primaries, or an elected official doesn't want to close the primaries, then you ought to have 100 red flags about why that would be. Because only Republicans should be choosing the candidate that comes out of our Republican primaries. So I would work not only through the lawsuit, but in the past and fairly recently, I have spoken to several elected Democrats as well as the chair of the Colorado Democrat Party, looking at some legislation that could benefit both parties to close these primaries. While the Democrat Party doesn't love our candidates, they hate our candidates. They'll be very frank with you. They'll say, closing the primaries produces the most extreme Republican candidates. First of all, we know that's not true. And when we start to talk about it more in depth, as I have with some of these Democrats, what emerges is actually closing the primaries eliminates bought and paid for candidates. It eliminates donor funded candidates, total donor funded candidates on both sides. And so when you look at it from that perspective, both parties can come to some agreement. Nobody wants Kent Theory buying the elections, whether you're a Democrat or whether you're a Republican. And that's something we can all agree on as human beings. So I think that while I definitely would continue the work of the lawsuit, I would also right away start working on some legislation to close the primaries and looking at literally every possible avenue to do that. So thanks for that question.
Would you continue what would that look like for you? I mean, there's been questions around, okay, if we close the primaries, is that only caucus only? Would you still allow, you know, candidates to do a hybrid model by petitioning on? Or is it just strictly caucus only and that's how you get on the ballot?
We're not equipped to go to a caucus only system. So, what I tell people is that while I understand that the caucus only system is the true route of the grassroots and it's the preferred system, and there are definitely ways to um, look at that in the future, until we close our primaries and until we start to really fundraise and flip some seats, we can't just suddenly go to caucus only. As we saw during the reorg meetings, counties are struggling to count the votes for 2 to 10 bonus member candidates, and it's taking them days to do it. And so while it sounds nice to say, let's go to all caucus, we simply can't. And so that's a conversation that I think Colorado Republicans, the voting body, ought to be having after we close the primaries. And if the body wants to move in a certain direction after the primaries are closed, then I think that that would be a more appropriate time to do that. But we definitely can't shoot ourselves in the foot and just take off running to an all caucus system. We could have a disaster on our hands, literally, Trent, where we're in a situation where, like, I don't even know who would be choosing candidates. But like I said, what we saw in the reorg meetings and what we see after every county assembly, every state assembly, we don't have that ability yet. So, let me get in there as chair and build a really good infrastructure and get some on point data and get the primaries closed, and then we could have a better conversation about what our system actually will look like for the next 100 years.
Absolutely. I mean, Iowa does it, and it would be great to reach out to them and say, "Hey, how do you guys do it?" Because they do it very efficiently, and there's 99 counties in that state, and they do it. And I think ultimately, if we're going to, talk about grassroots all day long, that's something people want to talk about and how we get there. And I agree, we're not even anywhere close to be equipped to be able to handle that. So, it's going to take more than just a 2 year plan to get this done. It's going to take multiple
Yeah,
years to get it done. But I think ultimately, Republicans should be electing Republicans, on to get onto the general election ballot. So
definitely.
that's yeah. So
Definitely. And
okay.
yeah, and as far as, like I said, the opt out and the caucus goes, I just, I'm in agreement. I love the grassroots, and I just don't want to sell a bill of goods that's a lie at this moment in time. I want to be realistic. If I were the CEO of a company and my employee said, "Well, I don't want to sell widgets anymore. I want to sell neon glow in the dark flying widgets," I can't just say yes. I've got to tell my employees what it would take to make that happen. And that's what I want to do here. I want to be realistic and set out a timeline that looks like this. It looks like getting candidates elected, building that infrastructure, closing the primaries. There's an order of things that I think we ought to follow if we're going to really, like I said, maximize what our parties to look like for the next 100 years or so.
Absolutely. Can you share your thoughts on primary neutrality?
Sure. So, as everybody knows, I led the historic endorsement of President Trump by the Colorado GOP. It was really important for us to do that because Donald Trump has stood for us time and time again. I mean, the man, they attempted to assassinate him. It's been political persecution. I mean, they want him in jail, they want him dead. And so, for those reasons, really, he is unlike any other presidential candidate of our time. It's unprecedented what they've done to Donald Trump. So, I really wanted to get in there and lead that endorsement of President Trump. And to me, I feel like the state GOP endorsing in the presidential primary is probably it's very different from endorsing down ticket. The party, the voting body was very clear that not only did endorsing down ticket make them really uncomfortable, but they don't want it to ever come back. I did not lead that effort. That effort was not my idea. The candidates, as you know, Trent, as a candidate, they did not communicate with me about their endorsements. They did not send their paperwork to me. That is something that is not was not my initiative in my role. So the party has my word, Darcy Schoening's word, that in primaries, the Colorado GOP will not endorse candidates.
Yeah, that's great. And I can tell you, as a candidate for HD 65 last year, I was reached out, that the state party did reach out to me. And that was not you that did that. And so that was done by the chair and vice chair of the party who, took that and ran with that. So I appreciate that. And what I want people to understand is, you know, as I've been involved in the Weld County politics off and on for the last 30 years since I was in, middle school here in Windsor. And, our party, local level, county level, state level, has never endorsed pre primary unless you were running unopposed. And so, you know, when I am talking to people like I was yesterday, I had a conversation with a group of people and they were discussing the presidential primary endorsement of Donald Trump. You know, You have to remind everybody, what was Donald Trump going through at that time? We were facing, and he was facing, an unprecedented situation where the state of Colorado led the charge to try to remove him from the ballot unconstitutionally and weaponize the judicial system to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And so, this was unprecedented. We were seeing something that has never been done in the history of this country. And for it to start here in Colorado, because the left who wanted to, and there were Republicans as well that led this effort to oust Donald
Yeah.
Trump from the ballot. And had it been successful and had it not gone to the Supreme Court, it would have set the precedent, across the country. Other states are trying to do it as well until it finally reached the Supreme Court, this case here. And so, I just want people to understand, when they're telling this message, what were we going through at that time?
Yeah.
And we were seeing something we had never seen before in the history of this country. So I felt like it was the right thing to do for the party. I
Yeah.
mean, Nikki Haley wasn't even close to getting anywhere in this race. So to send the message that, hey, what they're doing to Donald Trump is wrong, and we as a party, we as a state are going to stand by our president and our candidate, was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Moving forward, will it probably happen again? No, it probably won't never happen again.
Yeah.
But so to be able to have that endorsement, or when we did, that was important. And I know you led the charge on calling the counties to get them behind it. But I also do believe that you know the primary neutrality is important. For full disclosure, I was endorsed by the Colorado GOP, and did it help? No, it didn't help. But I thought, well, why not? What the hell? So
Yeah.
um, so there was. I just would like to see that reversed, to where we are not meddling in the primaries, but that during that time we are helping all candidates who are running, and that we're helping the counties, get out the vote and be successful in getting folks elected.
I totally agree. I couldn't agree more. Having run for office before, I think that we've got to keep it neutral. As you said, what we were going through with President Trump, what he was going through at the time was so unprecedented. I can't see those circumstances ever happening again. One of the things that I remember from that time that really urged me to want to seek that endorsement was that there were so many media entities nationally and locally that were running with this narrative: Colorado Republicans sue to keep Trump off the ballot. Because remember, it was for, I'll say it right now, and this will be the only time you guys will hear me say it: Republicans in name only, because that is what those four are. Norma Anderson, Krista Kafer, I forget the other two. Anybody who sues to keep Trump off the ballot, I'm sorry, you're just not a Republican. That's ridiculous. And so this narrative that there are Republicans in Colorado that want to keep President Trump off the ballot was so ridiculous and so outlandish that that's part of the reason that I felt, as the Colorado GOP, as Colorado, we've got to stand up. We've got to say, no, this isn't how all Republicans feel. Norma Anderson, for those of you who don't know, Norma Anderson is the mother of Pam Anderson, who ran for Secretary of State against Mike O'Donnell and Tina Peters and Jenna Griswold, and she was in that cycle. And she's not a Republican. I mean, she stood up and she said she wanted to bar President Trump from the ballot because he hurt her feelings. And so that was just something that I personally, and as the Colorado GOP, we could not allow the media to run with this Republicans wanted our great president off the ballot. Republicans don't think that way. They don't. And so we as a party, we needed to stand up and do the right thing. But down ballot is just that's a totally different circumstance from endorsing President Trump.
That's correct. And there were actually 6 Republicans who sued to keep him off the ballot. So it
Six.
had never happened before. And you're correct. I mean, we as a party couldn't stand by and allow, 6 Republicans to kick him off the ballot. And I mean, even with the liberals on the Supreme Court, it was voted, 9-0 to keep Trump on the ballot, and that states cannot keep presidential candidates off the ballot.
Yeah, exactly. And there were, I don't remember offhand, but weren't there two justices on the Colorado Supreme Court that didn't vote with their peers to take him off the ballot? Because when we were voting for judges on this last round, in November, I remember that there were two that we didn't necessarily want to oppose. I forget. I'll get that up for everybody, but it's important that we stand for those who do wrong, no matter what party they identify with. And so for Republicans to do something so disgusting, like I said, that's why it was important for the Colorado GOP to say, wait. That's not Colorado Republicans. Colorado Republicans love President Trump. We stand with him during the lawfare, the assassination attempts, and whatever else comes his way. But that's not the same thing as endorsing a state representative or a commissioner candidate. So that's what we need to stay away from.
Absolutely. So I know we're running up here on about 90 minutes or so. Does anybody else have any questions that you'd like to ask of Darcy? This isn't the only one we'll do. We'll do more of these as the time goes on. There's probably a little over 4 weeks, I think, left until we vote on the next chair for the GOP. But if anybody has any questions here before we end this here in a few minutes, please send an invite if you want to ask a question, or if you're already listed as a speaker and you have a question, please feel free to ask Darcy a question.
And thank you guys. Thank you all for being here tonight. As I said earlier, if you have any questions that weren't addressed tonight, or if there's any comments that you have that you want to have privately, feel free to reach out to me and give me a call or send me a message. And my pledge to you as chair is that attitude, that open door policy will never change. And as a matter of fact, I don't want to blab on, but that is one of my sticking points, is that I want the next chair and the next administration to have office hours. And I want to be there, and I want to be in the office, greeting you guys as you walk in and answering your questions. And I want the vice chair and the secretary to also have some office hours. And you, as voters, ought to be able to count on the fact that the people that you elected are there for you, and they're communicating with the state, as they should be. So that you have my word. You can always reach me, and we will have office hours.
Awesome. Okay, Christy, I'll keep you as the last one unless anybody else has, but you want to close it out with your last question there?
I can talk now? Sorry.
You can talk now if you want.
Okay. Hi, Darcy. This is Christy Davis. I'm the chapter chair of Moms for Liberty in El Paso County. And I just wanted to say a few things. Darcy has done phenomenal work with Moms for Liberty and Education over the past 4 years that I've known her. She helped us with the mental health assessment, the non legal name change bill, Title IX. And you touched a little bit on your Bob initiative working with our local school boards. This election cycle is going to be crucial for especially our school districts in El Paso County that we have been able to flip, and we're going to need to hold these conservative school board members and get stronger ones to stand alongside them. So I just was wondering if you could just touch a little bit on how you think that the GOP could help us with that, because you have been instrumental in helping us with the other things that I had mentioned, the mental health assessment, the non-legal name change, and Title IX, because this year, the NEA is the National Education Association, extremely upset having Trump in office. And I've heard that they're going to be pouring millions of dollars into this school board election. And because it's an off year for most states, Colorado is going to be a huge focus. And so I think we're going to need a lot of help. So can you just touch on how the GOP may be able to help us in this situation?
Yeah, thanks for that question, and thanks for all the work that you've done over the years. As you saw in the last set of school board elections, which I sort of touched on earlier, I was able to create a comprehensive database of all the elections going on across all the school boards in Colorado and identify which were those critical elections, where we could make inroads, and even where we couldn't. The one that the districts where we just say, what, this is not the year. We can support the candidates, but this is not somewhere where we can send critical resources. So we've got to triage those out. I like to say I put those candidates into tiers, and they would be receiving the same data, infrastructure, and resources as any other candidate. So they would have access to voter lists, donor lists. We'll be raising money for them, as I've already done, and will continue to do so. And then that money will be allocated in terms of need. But like I said earlier, we're fortunate that we now have control of the federal government and Trump is in office. So those areas where it seems like, they're going to be dumping millions from the NEA, or these are some seats that need even more of a critical focus than the Colorado GOP perhaps can provide. We will be reaching out to the RNC, reaching out to the Trump administration to put a little bit of a focus on some of those districts. So it's just about moving, like I said earlier, all in the same direction and making sure that all of those resources go to where they need to go. But it's not just the Colorado GOP. There are the Young Republicans. There are hundreds of conservative organizations across the state. There's activists, there's former candidates, there's volunteers. So the single most important piece, even aside from the money, the single most important piece that the Colorado GOP can provide to this, and that I have always brought to the table, is bringing those organizations, bringing those candidates together, and putting everybody on the same page. And that's what we need to do to make sure that we succeed in 2025. If we do that, if we all work together and we utilize every resource and every person's skill, we won't lose.
Okay. Thanks, Darcy.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
All right, thank you, Christy, for your question there. And just to clarify, the Colorado GOP and under your leadership isn't going to take the lead on the school board races. It's just you want to be able to go in and help, school boards help folks in their communities find school board candidates, find training for those school boards, work with organizations like Moms for Liberty, but it's not the GOP taking the role on this to do this.
Correct. So we would never want to take over races or lead candidates in any one direction. At the end of the day, the candidates always have to lead their campaigns. They're autonomous candidates and they're autonomous elected officials that are responsible to their constituents. So we just want to provide any resources and any infrastructure that they're willing to accept so that we can help them in their success.
Awesome. Well, thank you. We'll go ahead and close it out here. It's been 90 minutes here. We will be doing more of these, hopefully once a week here as we lead up to the election that takes place on March 29th. Is that correct? March 29th
Yes.
at the Rock Church in Castle Rock. It will be a hybrid um, event, I guess, so it'll be Zoom and in person. Now, can non-voting members come to the meeting?
Yes, anybody can come to the meeting. They just can't vote.
Awesome. Okay, they can be there. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Darcy, for laying out your vision here. We did post her website, Darcy4Chair, FOR chair.com, in the chat. Obviously, we're on Twitter here, so you can send Darcy a message or reach out to her. Any last closing thoughts, Darcy, as we wrap this up?
No, you know what? Thank you everybody for being on this call. I'm sure I'll have lots of thoughts when we hang up, but everybody just stay in touch with me. Like I said, send me a text, send me a message if you want to go have a cup of coffee. I'm definitely available for anybody who wants to do that. And I want to hear your vision too. It's not just Darcy's vision for the Colorado GOP. I want my vision to reflect the vision of the voters. So send me a call or send me a message, give me a call, and let's work together to take Colorado back.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thanks, everybody. I appreciate being on, and uh, check out Darcy's website. We've got all the interviews that she's done so far on radio on there. And if you want to jump on her email list, there is a spot on her website to be able to subscribe to that, I believe. Is that correct, Darcy?
Yes, there is. There that button is on the website, and my phone number is on the website as well.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you, Darcy. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and we'll see you again.
Thank you, Trent. Thanks for doing this and taking the time to host this.
Absolutely. Thanks,
Bye.
guys. Have a good night.